Hello and welcome to this edition of Access Asia. Amid international condemnation of the war in Ukraine, China must calculate how willing it is to back Russia. While the Kremlin may hope for assistance, Beijing's priority will be itself. And while Europe wonders what Moscow's next move is, Taiwan worries about Beijing's. China has long sought reunification with this self-ruled island. And as conservative Yoon Suk-yeol will be South Korea's next president, activists are devastated. We'll speak to an influential filmmaker about the state of women's rights in the country. How far is China willing to go to support Russia amid its war in Ukraine? The U.S. has warned there will be consequences if Beijing offers financial assistance or military support to Moscow. Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping may have pledged a no-limits relationship, but there's a cost to standing up together to their joint rival, America. Regardless, the war provides China with a case study of Western resolve and an opportunity to learn from Russia's mistakes.
With significant losses both on the ground in Ukraine and at home as its economy struggles to cope under the weight of Western sanctions, Russia seems desperate to bolster its position. In a bid to secure a lifeline, US officials say Moscow asked Beijing for military help and economic assistance. While China denies this ever happened, Washington warned Beijing that any moves to undercut Ukraine in the war would be punished.
We are communicating directly, privately to Beijing that there will absolutely be consequences for large-scale sanctions, evasion efforts, or support to Russia to backfill them.
The White House's National Security Advisor's words is the latest test for Beijing and Moscow's friendship. Since the start of the war in Ukraine, China has been left walking a diplomatic tightrope. The country abstained in the UN vote condemning Russia for invading Ukraine, a move seen as a win for the West. But Chinese officials have since described ties between Moscow and Beijing as rock solid. This as Russia steps up its aggression in Ukraine.
我们也是彼此最重要的紧密邻邦和战略伙伴。中俄关系作为世界上最关键的双边关系之一，我们的合作。
Beijing has been critical of Western sanctions but is keen to avoid putting its own country's financial interests at stake. If it offers a helping hand economically to Moscow, Beijing could be hit with secondary sanctions. Chinese media, however, remains pro-Russian. The US accused China of claiming that the Pentagon was financing biological weapons labs in Ukraine, a conspiracy theory originally spread by Russia. Washington has called the claims preposterous.
Taiwan also closely watching the war. Like Ukraine, the self-ruled island lives under the threat of a much larger neighbor. The Chinese Communist Party maintains that Taiwan will one day, quote, return to the bosom of the motherland. Lucas Hila and Oliver Ferry have more.
Ever since the start of the war, Taipei has been decked out in the colours of Ukraine. Thousands of Taiwanese have protested against the Russian invasion and against Vladimir Putin.
How can a country invade another without reason, destroy its territory and entire families?
Faced with overbearing pressure from mainland China, many Taiwanese identify with Ukraine.
I have a lot of empathy for Ukraine after the Russian invasion because, like Ukraine, Taiwan is a free country that happens to be right next to a dictatorship.
Beijing insists that Taiwan will one day be unified with the People's Republic of China, be it by choice or force. The Taiwanese have over 7 decades become used to the threat, but the war in Ukraine has raised the alarm. President Tsai Ing-wen has placed the army on high alert. This former general says Taiwan should pay heed to the response of Western countries to Ukraine.
NATO countries have supplied material and arms, but to fight the war, Ukraine is standing alone against Russia. Taiwan should take note of that. We can only count on ourselves for national defense.
And the Taiwanese understand that very well. Civil defense training sessions such as this one have become more frequent. Places are snapped up in a matter of hours. People learn how to scout shelters, find resources, and give first aid.
I've put off getting trained for too long, but the war in Ukraine was a wake-up call.
While the people of Taiwan worry about their security, Communist China rejects any parallel with Ukraine. As far as Beijing is concerned, the island will someday become part of its territory.
With a rapid increase of new cases, China is facing its biggest COVID crisis since the outbreak in Wuhan 2 years ago. Non-essential businesses in the manufacturing hub of Shenzhen have suspended production or told employees to work from home. New cases were also reported in the 4 megacities of Beijing, Tianjin, Shanghai, and Chongqing. Yoon Suk-yeol takes over South Korea's presidency in May. Earlier this month, he won the closest election in the country's democratic history. The former prosecutor's campaign, though, has stoked division. Vedika Bahel and Yin Ali have more.
He was a star prosecutor and the face of anti-corruption in South Korea, the man behind the convictions of 2 former presidents and the head of Samsung. Yoon Suk-yeol is now set to become the 20th president of Asia's 4th largest economy.
I think today's result is a victory for our people rather than a victory for me. We have to join hands and unite into one for the people and the Republic of Korea.
The Conservative plans to slash taxes on stock investments, loosen rules on cryptocurrency, and ease regulation on the property market, as well as hand out aid to small businesses hit by the pandemic. On North Korean issues, Yoon wants to restart talks, but also boost military deterrence by buying another THAAD missile system from Washington, despite the risk of retaliation from China. The incoming leader is not a feminist. On the eve of the election, Yoon Suk-yeol's team retracted a statement made to the Washington Post saying that he considers himself to be one. This on International Women's Day. Gender equality was a hot-button issue throughout the 2022 campaign, and Yoon's team targeted the young male vote, one that has become increasingly hostile to women and minorities' rights. The Conservative has pledged to abolish the Gender and Family Ministry. Yoon faces multiple challenges: deepening inequality, the world's lowest fertility rate, and Seoul's seemingly unstoppable property prices.
So as you heard in that report, gender equality a major issue. And for more, we can speak to Seoul-based filmmaker Eugene Do. Her recently released documentary, Open Shutters, looks at the country's spy cam scandal, a crime that affects thousands of women every year. Tiny cameras hidden in public restrooms, hotels, and changing rooms. The images uploaded to websites. First of all, it is clearly a very important issue, but why did you feel like it had to be you that had to make this documentary?
So I spent my 20s outside of Korea. So I wasn't really there when the entire huge feminism movement just kind of took off around 2015 and 2016 in South Korea. So I felt like a really bystander, and I felt indebted to my friend and my little sister who lives in Korea. And after that, I came back to Korea and started working for a media outlet. I met Jiyeon there. She was my coworker. Jiyeon is one of my main characters from this film, and she was also one of the victims of spy cam porn. And I remember the exact date. That was July 15 in 2018. I was in Thailand on my summer vacation, and she suddenly called me, and she sounded super anxious and scared, and she started talking about what happened to her. And it was really awful to see her in pain. And after a couple of months later, and she asked me to make a documentary about what really happened to her. So all started from there.
Okay, can you tell us why spy cam porn is such a big problem in South Korea?
I think the main reason is a lack of awareness of gender equality. Because if you look at all kind of statistics related to gender equality in South Korea, you guys are going to see us at the bottom in the chart. Okay, so back then, spy cam porn or filming women without consent wasn't really considered something really repulsive and abusive in this country. Everybody thought this is some kind of really casual prank and something really not that serious. But after all the huge protests, the largest women's rally in South Korean history happened, and all media started covering the story. After that, many people changed their thoughts right now.
So now the society is aware about the scandal. What about the justice? How effective have authorities been on cracking down on it?
I think there have been major two changes. The first one is, like, as I said, like how Korean society sees this issue. After all the protests and media started talking about it, finally, people started saying this is not something casual prank, this is illegal. And there were also changes in our legal system. Lawmakers started finally introducing a lot of bills to strengthen penalties and started protect victims.
Well, it sounds like there's some progress has been made, but is that at jeopardy now with the arrival of the new president, who many are calling anti-feminist?
Yeah, as I just said, if you just look at all the statistics, systemic and structural discrimination does exist in this country. And South Korea's next president, Yoon, he said publicly there is no such thing. This is really devastating. I mean, it makes everything really harder. Also, one of his main campaign pledges was the abolishment of the Gender Equality Ministry, which helped a lot of sex crime victims and single mother and father, teenager, and also multicultural families. So as you see, main strategy of Yoon's camp was literally based on misogyny, and he won this election based on hatred against all kinds of minority, not just women. So yes, I'm worried and more like devastated, and I feel terrified to see how Korean society will be suffered by this hatred under Yoon's regime.
Do, thank you very much for speaking to us, and congratulations on your documentary, Open Shutters. Very, very important work.
Thank you so much for having me. Bye-bye.
Well, that's it for this edition of Access Asia. Thank you for watching, and please stay tuned to France 24.